Fast forward, ini como o chona so AG Politics Avenue. Podcast or section because make headlines. Ya jamre na iribi aksumu awaha. Ani di mani ang roxy muse ene idi kanya. Structure which must subscribe to the channel. It's notification bell na so share na afofro so ensa intumi enkebi. Unia ya ko political highway sinimu na ejadam a enya asem koto akwa na ni nyina second ofori altar with me in bikini first appearance ɛwɔ court ɛwɔ US na what transpired over the day ne deɛ onua me na ɔkasa yi badwafoɔ agyemberɛ na deɛ ɛwɔ mu ne sɛ hearing no alɔyafoɔ kukudama ɔmo kɔpie mu ɛwɔ hɔ no nyinaa kɔ adwenkuro mu ama ɔmo tumi agyɛne hearing no to April 27th 2026 me na ɔkasa yi 3 months ahead of us and son and etimi atena asem no so lawyer Martin Kpebu private legal practitioner ono so convener kese ba ko a ono odi agina mpa yi pa se ken ofori ata omra Ghana hase na entesa abono no o meyi na no ono so na no atom bi wa kire se case na course no enye no nwanwa because I'm not surprised. According to lawyer Martin Kpebu, abra Ken Ofori Atta and lawyer make suggestion say hearing it should be in camera. Third parties are not wo Zoom ning na so free so no. Papa yi etu monchene na at this point in time you mongrem na yenhwe ne yeko ani de ba. AG Politics Avenue.
In court earlier today. Now, here's what we do know. As he was scheduled to reappear before the immigration judge today, yes, that hearing, the virtual hearing did take place today. As you're seeing, that's Ken Ofori-Atta in that dark blue jacket. That's the overall, and then the black shirt. In it was actually an overall black, and then he had a gray that's a pullover sort of on him. He took that off, and he took his seat. And this, we understand, connected from the detention center where he is. It's unclear exactly where the detention center he is now as we speak, because as you did hear Ambassador Victor Smith yesterday, per the information he has, Ken Ofori-Atta has been moved from the previous detention center, as we did know. He's now been moved to another detention center that as at the time, Ambassador Victor Smith did not give us the name of the new detention center where he is. So for what you're seeing is Ken Ofori-Atta at this detention center connecting with the court proceedings virtually, as was earlier also put out or announced by his lawyers. So this is what played out in this virtual hearing earlier today. Also, what we do know now, which has been confirmed, is that this case has been adjourned to April 27. April 27. And at some point, because this WebEx link to this virtual hearing was made public, we had lots of people connecting to it. And in fact, we had a huge Ghanaian interest there. And when we here at TV3 also got to connect to this hearing. And so we saw how many people who were in there. His lawyers secured a court order barring the general public from participating in the proceedings, insisting that they intend to raise sensitive matters. So at some point, when people, the general public, had connected to this WebEx link, viewing this virtual court proceedings live, then there was an announcement that Ken Ofori-Atta's lawyers have requested that his hearing should be private, in fact, a private hearing. So all the members of the public on that connection had to be shut out, including me. So this is it. This was the announcement that the trial judge made after Ken Ofori-Atta's lawyers' request. Take a look.
Investigating Anderson on behalf of DHS.
And Mr. Jason, given that the nature of the issues that will be discussed during the bond hearing, are you requesting that the bond hearing be closed?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm glad you raised that. I was going to raise it. And for the record, I would just let, if I may, Your Honor. But
so the other issue is there's also a master calendar hearing, and I believe that given the nature of the issues, that sensitive subjects will be raised during the master calendar hearing. Are you also requesting that the master calendar hearing be closed to the public?
yes, and one clarification, Your Honor. We would like both hearings to be closed to the public. However, with respect to the bond hearing, we would like to have that held as soon as humanly possible to include today. I defer to the court in how to make that happen.
I understand. So,
okay.
So all the individuals who are in the WebEx, the matter is going to be held as a private hearing under United States immigration law. If either party requests that a hearing be closed to the public, under the circumstances, the court is going to close this hearing. So if anyone in the WebEx who is here to view this hearing, either the bond hearing or the master calendar hearing, you should leave the hearing now because we cannot proceed until you have left the WebEx. And no one other than the parties will be allowed to be present during the hearing. So, and if you're an attorney who has another matter before the court this afternoon.
So that was the announcement. You see Kenneth Oriata seated there in a face mask. So he's the one who was seated in the face mask. You had that announcement that anybody who was not connected to this particular case had to be let off the WebEx connection there. And so this is it. This is what played out in that virtual hearing in court today before eventually the private hearing request by Kenneth Oriata's lawyers. After that request, the basis was that they said there were some sensitive issues that they were going to raise, reason why they wanted it to be a private hearing. That's why we're all cut off. As a result of that decision, here are the proceedings that were affected. The master county hearing. This is the initial hearing where the judge would confirm the identity of the said person, explains the rights, reviews the charges, and then requests whether or not you would admit or deny the charges, and then see if there is a need for a lawyer. That process, obviously, we saw play out. And then they would find out if the person who is standing trial intends to apply for relief, that is asylum, cancellation of removal, or the adjustment of status. If you remember, this adjustment of status was captured in Kenneth Oriata's lawyer's statement that they issued, informing all of us about Kenneth Oriata being held by ICE. This is almost 2 weeks ago, in fact, over 2 weeks ago, because this is the day 15 of Kenneth Oriata's detention by ICE. They set the dates for the future hearing. That's what we do know now, that this case has been adjourned to April 27. Now, also, this particular one, the bond or the bail hearing, and this was also to determine whether he is eligible to be released from the ICE detention despite pendency of case, whether you are a danger to community, flight risk, bond amount, that is if release is also granted. And then the lawyers for Kenneth Oriata, we understand, have urged the court to hold the bond hearings as soon as possible. And that is what you heard in what we just played to you. Kenneth Oriata's lawyers making that clear request to the court to hear the bond application as soon as possible. So this is it. Now, we do know that this case has been adjourned to April 27. But whether or not Kenneth Oriata will still be in ICE detention till April 27 is dependent on the outcome of this bond application by his lawyers. And that's what we're still knocking on the doors of the Ghana mission in Washington, D.C. to give us some more details as to whether or not the courts granted this bond application by Kenneth Freiata's lawyers. If it was granted, what that means is that even though the case has been adjourned to April 27, Kenneth Freiata could be released from the ICE detention and be at home and still work with his lawyers until April 27. So we'll get that detail. Martin Kpebu is private legal practitioner, is joining us on Zoom right now. Counsel, good evening. Thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. First off, as we did get that information, the virtual hearing happened today, but unfortunately, at some point, all of us who were hooked onto it watching live had to be let go because Kenneth Freiata's lawyers exercised their right to private hearing. How did all of this get to you?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because, from the way Freiata has been trying to run away from accountability, this strategy to not have the public hear what's going on falls in line. It's in line with his strategy from day one, evading accountability. So really, I'm not surprised. And you could see that earlier in the day, I monitored some radio stations where one of his lawyers was being asked whether this would be a public or a private hearing. Even from his answers, he would not be drawn on that, etc. The moment I saw that he would not be drawn on it, I knew that, look, in their wishes, they would have it private. And now they have it. Now they have it. I mean, we'll not dwell so much on the unfortunate situation of some people who made some unsavory comments. Usually, in a democracy, these things are to be expected. Just like Mr. Kanse, you and I, this interview we are conducting, you would find some people who would not be happy with what I've said or a question you would ask. And so they go to Facebook and other social media and then throw vitriol, etc. at us. Okay? So for me, to make a decision that the matter should go private because a few people are saying unsavory things, it's really not democratic. It's not in line with our democratic aspirations. Yes, in a democracy, it happens that some people would be upset. They would want to begin to even say negative things when the court has not decided. That's why I keep saying, Mr. Kanse, you and I on Facebook, if we open our Facebook pages now, you would see the thousands of people who've insulted us in one way or the other. But we've not stopped doing this work. But for Freiata, the fact that he won't come to Ghana and had to be embarrassingly...
I see. Counsel, you point to what could possibly be the reason for the request by his lawyers for a private hearing. They were quite clear that the reason why they were making this application, which was granted, by the way, by the courts, was because of the sensitive nature of the issues they were going to raise, not because of any of the other matters that you referenced.
Okay, sure. Why not? I mean, we can grant that, but isn't it the case that when people started making the comments, there was a break in the hearing for a while? Was that not the case?
Yes, they took a break after, yes, they took a break and then came back after 20 or so minutes, yes.
Yeah, you see. So the comments affected the proceedings. It's not always about only what people say, but it's also what they do or the actions surrounding. So the comments necessitated a break. So for me, I think they are together. They are inextricably interlinked. You can't separate them. Once there was a break as a result of the invectives, the vitriol, etc., you cannot rule it out of the reasons for the hearings being made private subsequently.
I see, but clearly, if you see how things played out today, the preoccupation of Kenneth Freiata's lawyers, at least in the interim, is to get him out of ICE detention. And then every other thing will play out going forward, because the case has been adjourned to April 27, but there's a bond application as well, Counsel, so that is a bail to have him released from the ICE detention. Then the process will still continue. You get that indication that that's really their preoccupation for now, at least with his release.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And you see, once that is the case, you remember I kept saying from the beginning that I'm waiting with bated breath. This okay, because we cannot predict when Ufuriata will be brought back to Ghana. Do you see that as of now, the next hearing is what? April 27th, right? So that's at least that's a little over 3 months, you see, for the next hearing. And that won't be the conclusion. So you see what we had been saying, that arresting Ofuriata in the US is one thing. He getting to Ghana is another ball game altogether. And that's what it's showing. Now, coming back to the bail hearing, yes, that is what they want to get. But in the US, I mentioned that to get bail in such circumstances can be very difficult if the extradition proceedings angle is brought to bear on the court. I remember that the US is stricter when it comes to granting bail to somebody who is undergoing extradition proceedings. So the case I'm making is that right now this is an ICE detention, but also with the extradition detention added to it, because the Attorney General said he had been working, that's Dr. Dominic Ayini, he had been working with the US government to get his visa revoked, etc., right? And then now it appears the extradition proceedings are also, what do you call it, a reason for this arrest. So I'm saying that once the extradition proceedings are confirmed to be part of the reasons for the arrest, then getting bail is more difficult, because in the US, by their law, when you're doing extradition, it's more difficult to get bail. And for lawyers who want to follow it, you can refer to the case of Martin Kpebu number 2 versus Attorney General number 2. So you see in the judgment, I think, of Justice Benin, he looked at the jurisprudence in the US and compared to Ghana and said, well, for us in Ghana, we'll make all the offenses bailable, subject to the discretion of the judge. But when they were looking at the American law, they looked at that point and reviewed the cases and saw that in America, once you are facing extradition, it's far more difficult to get bail. So it's a complex matter, very complex.
I see.
I'm sure.
It is the complexity of it that leads me to my next issue, because earlier today, there was a peaceful protest by a pressure group, Arise Ghana. They say they want Ken Ofori-Atta in Ghana immediately. The complexity of it, how will this protest really impact on whether or not Ken Ofori-Atta will be brought to Ghana immediately, as they are requesting? Juxtapose that with the point you just made about how complex this situation is, and that is not that straightforward.
Good. The demonstration is very useful, very, very useful. And I had called for it some months before Arise Ghana took up the challenge. So remember, as we kept discussing this matter in October, I think sometime in October, then as we were getting frustrated with the matter of, and then into November, when the extradition proceedings were formalized, etc., then I started saying that, no, we will march to the U.S. Embassy. We will march to the U.S. Embassy. We will march to the U.S. Embassy. And so it's good that Arise Ghana is taking the challenge and led. This won't be the first and the last. They said they'll be there for 2 weeks. I intend to go join either tomorrow or the next day. We have to go and give all the support. And more Ghanaians should come out. Now, Mr. Okansi,
yes,
the usefulness of it is that it will then send a message to the U.S. government that the citizens are very concerned and very anxious to have Ofori-Atta back. You cannot discount this, because then it tells the U.S. government that it's not just the government of Ghana that wants to extradite Ofori-Atta, but the citizens are aware and are keenly following, and that we realize that extradition is largely political. Remember the main point, that even when the judge is done in the extradition proceeding saying you can extradite, deport this man to the country that is looking for him, the Secretary of State in the US, who is our equivalent of our foreign secretary, can say no, he's not sending the person either on humanitarian grounds, national security, etc. So the final word on extradition in the US It's not a legal question, but it's a political one to be decided by Donald Trump and his Secretary of State. So that is how come the picketing or demonstration at the U.S. Embassy is useful, so that it sends a message to the American government that citizens are taking this matter up themselves. Citizens are watching keenly, so the U.S. should not fail us. And it's good to remember that the ambassador mentioned sometime last week that's the U.S. ambassador, the new ambassador, that they will not stand in the way of the extradition. And you remember I mentioned earlier that yes, though he had given the assurances, that's not sufficient for us to stop. But rather, let's continue. Yes, let's continue, because politicians, and I told you how President Bush 41, those days in opposition, when he was campaigning, he said when he comes, he will not increase taxes. Read my lips. When he came into office, he did. Then I mentioned how Donald Trump too, sometimes it's not reliable, etc. So let's continue with the demonstrations. They help. They help.
Well, we will see how the complex nature of what you have just outlined to us in the coming days with Kenneth Friata, and this protest as well would also play out in the coming days, and how that would impact on the complexity of the situation. But thank you. Thank you so much, Counsel, for time this evening.
You're welcome.
Martin Kpebu is private legal practitioner on this matter. But as I just referenced, members of the pressure group Arise Ghana, they're saying they are incensed that the continuous stay.
We ain't some horo team course for channel so mavno so jemre o hara sene so bari no e dia dombi edomyenia unia e besan ba wram na ya somo kwan songo so pra